And welcome to this lecture. In this lecture, we're going to look at EBS volumes. This is a lab. You will need to log into the AWS console. And essentially, we're going to go in, we're going to provision a new EC2 instance with an EBS volume, and we're going to just do it as standard. And then we're going to look at how we can upgrade or downgrade that volume in a variety of different ways. So if you've got the time, join me in the AWS console. Okay, so I'm in the AWS console. We need to go over to Services and click on EC2 under Compute. And what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to launch an instance. We won't actually be logging into this instance. We are just going to create it and see what happens. So go leave everything as default. What we're going to do though is we're going to add a few different volumes. So I'm going to add an EBS volume, and I'm going to do one that's magnetic. I'm going to do one that's throughput optimized. I'm going to do one that is cold hard disk drive. And then I won't do provisioned IOPS. I'll just leave it as that. So we're going to have a EC2 instance. It's going to have 4 different hard drives attached to it. The root device volume, or where the operating system is stored, is going to be general purpose SSD. And then it's going to have 3 different drives. One's going to be magnetic, 8 gigs. The others are going to be 500 gigs, and they're going to be throughput optimized and cold hard disk drives. So let's go ahead and hit next. I'm going to add a tag, call it name, and then my little web server. Sometimes I like to give my EC2 instances odd names. Go ahead and hit next. I'm going to use my existing security group, the one that I created earlier. Hit review and launch, and go ahead and launch that instance. Now, that will take a little bit of time to provision, probably a couple of minutes or so. And once it has provisioned, I'm just going to pause the video, and then we'll go in and see what we can do with it. Okay, so my EC2 instance is up and running. Take a note at the availability zone. My one is in EU West 2A. Now, if we just go over to our volumes and click in here, we'll be able to see all our different volumes. I've actually got 2 volumes here that I created earlier that I haven't actually gone ahead and delete. So I'll just quickly delete those so that we don't get confused. Okay, so those are now being deleted. In here, note the availability zones for all our live volumes. So it's EU West 2A, EU West 2A, EU West 2A, EU West 2A. And if you noticed, the EC2 instance was also in EU West 2A. So a very common question that will come up in an exam is basically it's testing you on whether or not you can have an EC2 instance in one availability zone and an EBS volume in another, and then be able to mount that EC2 instance, that EBS volume to EC2. The answer is no. They have to be in the same availability zones. And if you think about that, I mean, basically, if you think about the way a computer is designed, the hard disk drive is as close to the as close to the motherboard as possible. You do not want a hard disk drive over 55 miles away. The latency is just going to be too much. So do remember that you always have to have your EC2 instance and the actual EBS volumes in the same availability zone. That will score you some points. So the way we can tell which is our root device volume is it's based off a snapshot. The snapshot is simply the Amazon machine image that we used when we first provisioned it up. So this is our root device volume. You can see here it's GP2. If we go to actions, we now have the ability to modify this volume on the fly. So we can actually upgrade this to provisioned IO if we want. And we can even change the size of the volume, and we're not going to have any downtime. There will be performance issues, obviously, because you're changing storage types, but you're not going to have any kind of downtime, and you don't have to go ahead and stop the instance. Previously, you would have to go in and stop or take a snapshot. That is no longer the case. So we can modify this one. Let's have a look at some of the other ones. With ST1, we can modify the volume. So with standard, we can't modify the volume. Remember, standard is just pure magnetic. It's the oldest storage array or oldest storage volumes that are available. These date back to 2006. So you can't go in and modify the volume. With SC1, we can modify the volume. So we can basically modify the volume for everything apart from normal magnetic storage, and we can do that on the fly. So another common exam question is, let's say we've got an EC2 instance in EU West 2A, and we want to create another EC2 instance or another volume in another availability zone. How do we go ahead and do that? Well, the first thing is we need to go in and take a snapshot of the EC2 volume. So to do that, we just go in here and we go create a snapshot. I'm going to call this my little web server snap, and just do the same for the description. I'm going to go ahead and create. This will take a little bit of time to create, typically about 5 minutes. So again, I'm just going to go ahead and pause the video. Okay, so I'm going to go over to snapshots, and we can see the snapshot is there. And then we can go in here and we can do some actions. So we can go ahead and create an image. We can create another volume from it. Let's create another volume. And if we click on create another volume, you can see that we can change the volume types. So we can go down to magnetic, we could go up to provisioned IOPS, etc., etc. And what is also cool is we can change the availability zone. So we can basically create a volume of this snapshot in a separate availability zone, and then we could attach it to a new EC2 instance. I'm not going to go ahead and do that, but it's really important that you understand for your exam that in order to move EBS volumes from one availability zone to another, you need to create a snapshot first, and then from that snapshot, you can create a new volume in a new availability zone. I'm going to hit cancel and just have a look at what else I can do with this snapshot. So the snapshot, I can go in and I can hit copy. Copy will allow me to move it to another region, so I can move it anywhere in the world. So again, it's really important to understand that. So if you are asked in in the exam, how can you move an EC2 instance from one region to another? First thing you need to do is create a snapshot, and then you copy the snapshot to a new region. And then once it's in the new region, essentially you're going to create an image of that snapshot, and you'll be able to then boot it from EC2. So on that topic, let's go ahead and create an image from our snapshot. When you create an image from your snapshot, you are then able to essentially boot it as a new EC2 instance. So I'll call it my little web server. And we will have a lab coming up where we basically are going to encrypt a root device volume, copy it to another region, and then boot an EC2 instance from it. So we will do that in another lab. So we'll go ahead and hit create. This will now create an image from an EBS snapshot. So snapshots are typically used for backups. Images are used to, basically, create new EC2 volumes from. And we'll be doing quite a bit of that in the labs coming up. So it does take a little bit of time to do an image. If you click in AMIs right now, so this is where your images are saved. Sometimes it won't even show you that it's doing an image. So it can take a little bit of time. I'm just going to pause the video for about 5 minutes. Okay, so my AMI is now ready. In here, we should be able to hit launch, and there you go. You've got all your different instance types that you can launch from. And of course, when we do launch this, we can hit next, and we can choose what availability zone that we want to launch into. So under subnet, we could launch it into another availability zone. And we also have the ability, if we click in here, we go copy AMI, and we can copy this over to another region as well. So that's how we can migrate our EC2 instances. We basically go in, create a snapshot, and then create an AMI from the snapshot, or you could just directly create an AMI from the EC2 instance. It's entirely up to you. And then we can move it around to separate availability zones or to separate countries. So we will do another lab where we do move it from London to Northern Virginia. So that will be coming up, and we'll also look at how we can encrypt our root device volumes while doing that as well. So feel free to go in and delete these instances. You won't need them. You'll just hit deregister. Same with your snapshots. Feel free to go through and delete them as well. And delete your EC2 instance. One thing you should note is by default, the root device volume will be terminated, but the other EBS volumes that we've created won't be terminated when we go in and terminate our EC2 instance. So just bear that in mind. So if we go instance, terminate, and hit yes, terminate, it's going to go in and terminate my instance. But if I go back to my volumes, these 3 volumes here won't be terminated by default. It's only my root device volume that will be terminated. They'll just sit there and say available. So do bear that in mind as well. And so if I just hit refresh now, you'll be able to see these volumes are now available. So I have to go in and manually delete them. So go ahead and do that. Just as a cleanup, you can click in here and hit delete. And so that's deleted my volumes. Okay, so my volumes have been deleted. Now you might also want to go ahead and delete your snapshots as well. And once you've done that, let's go on to my exam tips. Okay, so we're almost done. I just want to go through it, just some theory before we move on. So volumes obviously exist on EBS, and a volume is just a virtual hard disk drive. That's all you need to think of an EBS volume as. When you're talking about a root device volume, that simply is where the operating system is installed. So it's basically like your C drive if you're a Windows user. Snapshots exist on S3. Just be aware of that. It's not like you can go into S3 and see a bucket that contains all your snapshots. You don't get that kind of visibility, but you have to understand that the actual snapshots themselves are saved on S3. And snapshots are basically a point-in-time copy of the volume. So it's just like literally like taking a photo of the hard disk drive at a particular point in time. If you were then to wait an hour and there'd been some changes, essentially what the next snapshot is going to do is just make a note of those changes. So snapshots are incremental. This means that only the blocks that have changed since your last snapshot are moved to S3. So every time, you're only recording the changes essentially. So you're not creating a identical, or you're not creating another copy. It's literally just the changes, and you save on a whole bunch of storage on that. And if this is your first snapshot, it may take some time to create. What else did we learn? Well, to create a snapshot for EBS volumes that serve as root devices, you should probably stop the instance before taking a snapshot. However, you can take a snap while the instance is running. You can create Amazon machine images, or AMIs, from both volumes and snapshots. You can change EBS volume sizes on the fly. Really important to remember that, including changing the size and storage type. So that is now possible. It used to be a really popular exam question when you couldn't do that, and they would say, how do you do it? But now you do have the ability to change it on the fly. Again, best practice, you probably stop it, but you don't have to. You can do it while the machine is running. This is pretty amazing technology, actually. I sometimes just wonder, what's actually going on behind the scenes there? Volumes will also be in the same availability zone as the EC2 instance. So really seriously remember that, because this is very, very popular exam topic right now. So your EC2 volume, your EBS volumes will always be in the same availability zone as your EC2 instance. You cannot have an EC2 instance in one availability zone and then have the EBS volume in another availability zone. The latency just doesn't work. So do remember that. And then finally, to move an EC2 volume from one availability zone or region to another availability zone or region, you just need to take a snap or an image of it and then copy it to the new AZ or region using that copy command we saw in the console. Again, you will be tested on this multiple times, not just on availability zones, but on regions. So you need to either take a snapshot or an AMI. You can do either, and then you'll be able to copy it to another region. And because it was all stored on S3, I'm assuming they're using cross-region replication in order to achieve that. Volume, in terms of security, we are going to go and do another lab where we're going to encrypt it, but I just want you guys to know ahead of that snapshots of encrypted volumes are going to be encrypted automatically. So if you take a snap of a volume that's already encrypted, the new snap is going to be encrypted automatically. And then volumes restored from encrypted snapshots are also encrypted automatically. And that you can share snapshots with other people, but only if they are unencrypted. If you encrypt your snapshot, you cannot share it with other people. You cannot make it public. And these snapshots can be shared with other AWS accounts, or you can make them completely public so that anyone can use it. So I would actually do this lab one more time before you go in and do your exam. The reason is knowing how to move EBS volumes between availability zones and regions, and just the stuff that you've learned in this particular lab will make up probably 4 or 5 or 6 questions in your exam. So it is really important. Understanding that and VPCs is fundamental to passing. So do check this lab out. I'll do it one more time before going into your exam so it all sinks in. So that's it from me, guys. If you have any questions, please let me know. If not, feel free to move on to the next lecture. Thank you.